As you can see, I'm Diego Magalhães at AM for everyone living in Canada, right? I'll be conditioning you to move your desktops to AWS with Amazon WorkSpaces, and today's session should be brief. We're going to have a couple of talking points on the business side and also on the technical side, and also all the steps that you need in order to really use your virtualization or desktop as a services, right? But let me first introduce why do you need desktops over any sorts of a remote session, right? Business landscapes right now is changing all over the world. Just in Canada, since 2016, and that's data from census, 59% of the Canadians are really commuting more and more time. And that time became, if you're in Toronto, Vancouver, any other big center, you're going to see that that time increased by a two-time fold, right? So you're spending more and more time commuting. So remote working is also a reality. What that means is that more and more companies are adopting a strategy of leaving their workers remote. Even in Ottawa, that happens a lot. Your company's downtown Toronto, but you work from home. You work from your parents' home. You work from your, kids' home. It doesn't really matter, right? And also the dynamics of that workplace is changing. So geographical location is not a limitation anymore. With that being said, more and more the adoptions of a couple of points has been a struggling point for those organizations that are trying to adopt remote working into their work environment, right? A little bit farther than that is the far stretch of the current situations is the cloud to the classroom, right? We've been taught that distant learning will be a thing since 10, 15 years in the past, right? It has been a thing. It wasn't really compelling to have distant learning 10 years ago. Now it's just a reality. People attend to any kind of students, international students, mostly welcome to attend those sessions. Remotely, and then every now and then just come on board and do a live testing into the classroom, right? We do have a program that teach you or give you access to that cloud curriculum that's called AWS Educate, and we're going to talk a little bit more further down the path, right? So what we've been hearing from customers, the thing is that 95% of the roadmap from AWS is driven by your customers, right? So again, what's not working right now? Your inventory, renewing those labs into the education institutions, having to upgrade, let's say, for example, your BI team does have to have that new computer or new computing cluster every 2-4 years. So that's not working for them, not working for the institutions. More and more, they bring your own device. It's a reality, right? It's not just your computer. It's your iPad, your iWatch, your Apple Watch, your Android phone, your tablets, and those are becoming more and more a reality, right? So with the advent of that mobility, also became apparent that some things has to change. Other than that, it's just like the on-premise VDI still remains true, right? So you have your virtualization mechanisms and also virtualization desktops for all your employees. Since the secretary up in the welcoming room, the receptionist, up to the boardroom that does need just Excel and maybe a PowerPoint every now and then. So again, they really don't need a desktop for all of the time. One thing that we come short, and every now and then, security breaches, right? Data sharing between those devices, data sovereignty, and data residency when coming and go. So how do we answer those questions from the AWS perspective? Amazon WorkSpaces is the name of the product. It's a secure, cost-effective, managed cloud desktop for you to use. And let me introduce you the ways that you can use that, right? So first of all, it's a scale on demand. If you need one desktop right now and then 200 later down the week because you had a good experience, that you can have it, right? So you also don't need to commit upfront with all those investments. Every now and then, if you're running your VDI solution, you might as well have data to pay upfront 200 devices because those devices are the one that enables you to have the remote desktop capabilities coded and uncoded, right? And also they are secure, meaning that that data does not get back and forth within your networking. You send your data, your click-ins to that remote desktop through a secure connection, and all those pixels that are transmitted are also encrypted end-to-end, meaning that no data is shared. And once the data is worked there and you finish your session, the data is stored locally whenever the region that you choose to. So let's say, for example, you choose Canada, Montreal region, your data stays here, do not overflow to US, do not overflow to Europe, and so on, right? So there's all the compliance part that we're gonna talk about it as well. The scale and consistent performance on that end, meaning that once you know what your expected usage might follow, then you can use the appropriate machine or appropriate desktop version. What means is that every now and then, if you're trying to go and buy desktop as a service, it might be on-prem, it might be over the cloud, it really, people will tend to start selling you the device itself and then the technology as a desktop as a services, and not for once think about your use cases. If it's a CPU intensive, if it's a graphic workload, if you just need a desktop for your receptionist. So you're going to see throughout the presentation that we really works backwards from what you need, and then we figure out what's best suited for you, right? We talked about a little bit of that into the introduction, right? So the PC Lifecycle Treadmill right now is either your education institution or enterprise customer, it really doesn't matter. You have to renew that computer lab, a computer park every 2-4 years, right? And it comes to a leasing, it comes to buying new devices, even if they're more specialized, let's say, for example, a graphics workstations, that's a little bit of a awkward positions, right? You're just putting more money in there despite of the usage, right? So again, you might have seen in other presentations the OPEX versus CAPEX, the operational cost versus the capacity that you put it in. But what means that at the end is that you should be treating, as long as you're not a hardware provider, that as a mean to get your main driver, main business driver, not really spending money and spending time with that kind of activity, right? Flexible billing options, so the WorkSpaces offering over Amazon Web Services come in 2 flavors, right? The first one hourly, and the second one monthly. The main difference is the breakdown, right? The break even on hourly, so if you use more than 84 hours in a month, 82 to 84 hours a month, then you can go monthly. Other than that, go hourly. So what means is that, there's a couple of technicalities into that, but the main difference between those is that always on, meaning that no matter what you're doing right now, if you go online and click want to access my WorkSpaces, it will be on, available for you, right? It's just a computer running into the cloud, a desktop available for you. Whereas the hourly WorkSpaces works exactly like the same, but from time to time, you can set and choose what the time of that session. Once it's got inactive for that amount of time, it goes sleeping. But at the end, if you go back again, it takes about 2 minutes, 1 to 2 minutes, and you have your desktop back. Let's say, for example, you're running your education institution, you're running a summer camp. If you're running a summer camp, it makes no sense to have a monthly desktop for those users, those students. So you just run hourly. They might use 20 hours, so you pay 20 hours a month for each user, and that's it. That's your fixed price costing with those desktops. So again, you can see the game changer when you're talking about a real estate, and that's one thing when we're talking about education institutions, that you have limited amount of real estate available, right? So if you forget about that, and all of a sudden I give you access to a limited number of desktop computers, you can have a limited number of students at a single time doing whatever they want with your education portal, distant learning suite, or anything for that matter, right? Some of the use cases are over here. I outlined the distant learning one. Workshops, if you have ever attended reInvent sessions or workshop sessions, they run within WorkSpaces, Amazon WorkSpaces. So again, enabling one-time events, recurring events, or even a 24/7 type of events, and it really adds to your use cases. So again, we're not prescriptive about which type of use cases that you can run. It's up to you to figure out, alongside with us, the best fit for the best scenario. So again, we can start it up with a single Linux machine, which is really small, really minimal footprint. But then you figure out you need to run HPC workloads on Windows. Okay, that's fine. We can go there, put any NVIDIA graphic card on that workspaces and make that work for you as well. Okay. For those who have attended to reInvent last year's or several past editions, those are workspaces running in the hands-on labs. This year, again, there will be hands-on sessions, and that will be powered by the Amazon workspaces, right? We talked about use cases, and also how easy it is to go from zero to having our workspaces. But again, what it matters is that everything runs smoothly, but also secure, right? It will play well with your existing tools, right? If you're having an internet, so again, I want to put that workspaces into the cloud. My first question will be, would that connect with my internet portal? Would that play nice with my private networking that I have configured over the years over here? And also, I'm using Microsoft all over the place. Would that behave well with my Active Directory? And the answer for all those questions would be yes, right? So having the intranet and also the Active Directory are no big deal, I would say. And then connecting your Active Directory, and when we're going to talk about it, should I have my Active Directory over the cloud, or should I have it locally on my on-prem and then running from there? If you need to set it up some additional security measures, let's say, for example, I need to use a multi-factor authentication. So again, we play safe with radios devices. So you can use your Gemalto token, for example. We do use Gemalto tokens all over the place to be a second factor authentications. You can use that as well. Again, it's a Windows, or it could be a Linux. It plays well with your system-centric SCCM. So if you have to baseline update policies, use group policies, update all the Windows at once, or at least track each of them, you can do as you do today. And one additional thing is the certificate authority, right? So for those who doesn't know, let's say, for example, you want to make sure that only allowed computers, specifically computers, are allowed to connect to your workspaces because there's sensitive data over there, or because it's a computer into the cloud. So you can use that a particular certificate, import that certificate into your workspaces panel, and then work throughout that to assure that only those Mac or PC computers can connect to your workspaces throughout the cloud, right? It will improve your security in almost cases that you run through. First of all, there's a share nothing space. So again, whatever is over the cloud into that workspaces machine stays there. Does not overflow to your network, does not overflow to your computer. There's no shared anything. So except if you're willing to put a drive between those desktop and your computer, that's one thing. But it comes bundled with a couple of options, so you don't have to share anything with a local computer. The local data, so whenever you're launching a new workspaces desktop, you can have at once, at a launch time, you can encrypt the root volume and also the data volume of that workspaces. So again, if you have an encryption key, you want to send the same encryption key to the cloud to have the same management or the single point of management of those secure keys, you can have it, and you can use the same keys all over the place. And as I've mentioned in the beginning, the desktop streaming, so the clicks that you do, all the interactions is all encrypted, AES 265, 256. So again, makes no mistakes, so everything from transit to the rest will be encrypted, right? And because we're talking about a government, and because this is a public sector summit, compliance could be no further than the actual reality, right? So we do the compliance on the other side, so you can rest assured that whenever you're working or running your workloads, it's also compliant, or at least we ease you up on checking marks those compliance needs. It's HIPAA eligible, although it's US, and HIPAA is coming over, that we can get a sort of whatever you need to classify that as a pro HIPAA services that you can use. If you have GDPR by any extent because you have users over there or because you have data from users that are throughout overseas, again, you're safeguarded from that kind of activity, right? And again, this is a remote desktop, right? At the end of the day, it's your virtual desktop over the cloud. So if you have a agreement with Microsoft over the licensing, you can bring your own licensing. What that matters is that you don't have to, again, circle back and forth, figuring out how do I licensing those additional windows. And if you have right now any remote desktop gateway or any type of virtualization that involves Windows, you're already dealing with multiple calls or any remote session licensing that you're struggling to figure out what should I use and when should I use. Am I allowed to launch those? So you can either bring your own licensing or you can work with on-demand licensing so you don't have to the hurdle of figuring out back and forth what's the right procurement vehicle that I should use to have those licenses attached to those workspaces, right? Again, consistent user experience comes just from having that workspaces activated back and forth. On the simplicity side, again, they're all built-in golden AMI. So AMI stands for Amazon Machine Images. Let's say, for example, you have your Windows with your applications installed. We offer you a bundle that comes with the Windows, a couple of utilities, and also Microsoft Office. If you want to run Linux, we also offer you Amazon Linux too. But let's say, for example, you want to run your own flavor of Windows with a whole bunch of applications installed, or your application suite needs to be installed on every single workspace. You can go there, configure that, and build that app or package that app as a Amazon Machine Images. With that golden images, you can, within minutes, you can provide users new workspaces. So typical user scenario or use case would be a university when hosts, again, a summer workshop on Excel, right? So what you want to do, you have Excel installed on all those machines, or you use a readily available bundle, and then that's it. You have your use case up and running, right? Multiple devices supported, right? We're talking about Windows, we're talking about Mac, but again, you can use a multitude of devices. And the reality that we're facing so far is that iPads and Android tablets are a way of doing homework and also doing remote sessions. So again, feel free to, any of those are available as a thin client, or if you want to use a web browser, you can use a web browser. Without any plugins installed. So you can reach out here, fire up your browser, go to your workspaces, and then access that. Cornell University has been doing that for a long time. They started with Amazon Educate. So Amazon Educate enables both professors and students to access cloud curriculum, generating the, I would say, the workforce for tomorrow. They will learn that. But they will learn that through Amazon Workspaces at Cornell. They, as you can see here from Jeff's code, they're more and more into innovating and giving the ability to students to study freely without the constraints of time, place, and even at their own place, right? So the sky's limit would be a far stretch from Jeff's code, right? We launched 3 months ago, the Amazon Linux Workspaces. So I've been talking about Amazon Linux 2, it's the version that we released. Sorry. And we also offer long-term support. So long-term support means that we will provide you updates just like you have today with our other workspaces. And let's say, for example, if you need a kiosk support and you have to run a Windows license for that, just run a Linux kiosk environment. So you can run that right away. So from 9 to 5, you can run your kiosk without having to worry about anything, right? Addition to that is the file and collaboration, right? So the workspace itself has a local disk. That local disk will offer you the ability to store data. It will be persistent, and you can turn it on and turn it off again, right? Once you come back, these files will be there. But let's say, for example, you want to enable share between teams, and you don't want to deal with file servers and things like that. So WorkStock's there for a reason, right? It comes bundled. You can install the services, and on the technical part of the presentation, we're going to go through that the steps that you need to active configure that. But what that means is that once you have the client configure on those workspaces, you enable just like a point and click or a drive ladder mapping on your Windows Explorer or your files at Linux, and you can share files across your directory service. You can enforce the same type of security. So again, group policies, roles, claims, everything that you're used to do as a file administrator, you can do as well within your work docs, right? We have a cool offering that's really pleased. So every workspace is entitled right now is a 50 gigabytes of free tier. But for an additional $2 per user per month, you get a 1 terabyte of user data. That means is that 1 terabyte of shareable space between one single user across the organization, no matter how much of they're using right now. Think about for a moment, you have no need to worry about the file space anymore within on-prem. Remember your file server with your desktops? So not just the desktop itself, but also the file server is no more a concern of a constrained capacity for their investments, and also buying storage every 2-5 years a deal, right? Let's talk about a little bit of how do we get there, right? So first of all, remember, we're going to use a fictional scenario, but you, of course, can relate to that kind of scenario. You will be an existing AWS customer, meaning that it's a little bit aware of how things works from a design perspective over AWS, which is a virtual private cloud, which is how do I connect to a instance over there, and I will have a Active Directory just for example, right? So the approach is a little bit different. We ain't going to push you, so you need 200 workspaces. I'll just push 200 workspaces, say goodbye, have fun. It's your own lucky to configure everything. First of all, decide what user segmentation you want to do. Remember that we talked about creating a Amazon machine image. So it's all based on usage. So if your user don't really need a Adobe Photoshop or Microsoft Office, do not bundle that with their Amazon machine images. So segmenting the use case will be the first scenario. Figuring out what's the best approach, right? Out of those user cases, let's figure out what's the best initial use case. What causes you less friction for your users? It doesn't matter if you want to push VDI use cases on every single customer of yours, end users, or even teachers, or IT department, that wouldn't work. So again, everything comes to a price. So cultural shift or cultural shift paradigm should be taken seriously whenever you're offering virtual desktops, right? The first resistant barrier, of course, is this, it will be slow because it's not my desktop, it's not over here. But they're already using SaaS over the browser. So they're inherently, they know that that's not real true. It's just like fear of change. Third point will be evaluate the performance characteristics. So again, it doesn't really matter. If everyone's going to run Windows, it takes a little bit of a time to have Windows up there running, maybe 2 minutes, but every on use cases will be the same. Do they need a graphic card to do that kind of approach? Is any HPC involved? Do they do BI analytics? Do they need a high performance computing or at least a huge amount of RAM? So it all depends, right? We go over one CPU, 2 gigs of RAM, up to 32 gigs of RAM, and 8 CPUs. So again, it's a variety or a plethora of virtual desktops that you can do, build, and pilot your solution. So build a pilot solution, right? So get a few users, get a use case, learn what they want to do, and then run a pilot. Fix the pilot, right? So the pilot's there for a reason. Once you run the pilot, you're going to get the feedback. Do they need a faster machine? Did the workspace meets their quality needs and quality of life? Do they need to be like 24/7 or on-demand will do? Do they need to be right away? Could they be integrated with work docs? Would that work for them? Then run would say that the last part will be run a acceptance test. After everything is done, and that might be 1 week, 2 weeks, depends on the user knowledge of AWS and how we are approaching that, to several months if you're doing like a 200 workspaces solution deployment, right? Deploy and iterate. So deploying the workspace is not the final scenario. You might as well be one single workspace works best for that kind of users, but he might have different hats throughout his month. So maybe in the last part of the month, he's more focused into accounting and billing. So why not having a different workspaces just for that instead of just shoving everything in a single workspaces? So from a account structure, and that's the part which is a little bit more technical than the business part, there's segmentation, right? So same thing, one user shouldn't have a single computer, might have different workspaces, and that same workspace shouldn't live together with the applications, the server, the BI solutions that you have. That should be segmented, right? There's a suggestions over here where we push like a shared services infrastructure. You can see up in the middle, the shared services serves as everything that's used by multiple users. So your Active Directory, your ADFS, your multi-factor authentication that should be running up there. And then we have several different accounts, right? One of the accounts should be the workspaces. Should be just a single workspaces accounts. It all depends, right? If all those your workspaces should be talking with each other, should be traffic flowing freely from one another, maybe yes. But let's say, for example, you have tiered of users that do accounting, doing core business, and even developers that need their own workstations. That should be a separate account for each of them, right? And there's also, you can see on the far right, well, it's your far right, my far right? Isolated apps or third-party. So what that means is that at the end of the day, if there's something that shouldn't be talking with the workspaces, again, you should be segmenting that. Do not make the same mistakes. You don't have the limitations that you had previously on-prem. So right now, it's all logical, right? So you don't have to pass cables going through routing things. It's just like configuration. So make sure that you do it once, do it right, and do it secure. And again, you can see up in the top, you're going to see buckets. That's the simple storage service. You can get login, config, and billing all together into the primary master or payer account. You can hear different terms over the different types of sessions, but that means is that that account over there will control the auditing part, the billing part, how much it costs and how, right? Go into a couple of considerations of the Active Directory. First of all, if you're running any workload into the cloud, you should consider migrate or at least extend part of your Active Directory into the cloud. Why? Latency. So again, every time you need to check for authorization, permissions, group policies, and so on, or even applying to that, you don't want that single machine going back from, let's say, for example, Montreal back to Vancouver and so on and so forth. You can extend that over to the cloud, make a copy of it, or make a copy of part of it, and then support every user in your organization that's remote throughout the cloud, right? Cross-account, when we say cross-account Amazon, virtual private cloud, means that different boundaries, as we saw on the previous slide, and let me get back just a little bit. Whenever you see the green boundary over there with the grayish, We mean cross VPC, and we are saying cross account, different accounts, sharing traffic back and forth. One capability that we give you is that you run Active Directory over the cloud, and you share that same Active Directory with different accounts within your organization. So again, segmentation, policy, security, privacy, and all the needs for compliance that you need. There's a couple of the last two talking points again is defining how you wanted that traffic to go back and forth, and also the sizing, right? Whenever you're running two Active Directories, there's something called DNS options that you can say, whatever this resource is running into the cloud, it should go at least against my local on-cloud Active Directory first, and then go back to on-prem if it does not find what is needed, right? From a global availability perspective, WorkSpaces is throughout the world. Right now, we have the availability over the Montreal region. So again, if your concerns are data residency or even if your traffic's not leaving Canada at all, again, feel free to thread out the Montreal region. From a price perspective, there's a little bit of a same pricing. If you go over the public pricing page, Virginia will be the less expensive. Montreal will probably be just the exchange rate to have a little bit bump it up. But as far your experience should be the same on all your regions throughout the world. And by seeing that, you also get another enabler that you're not translating directly into words. Let's say, for example, you want to hire someone from Europe or Australia, Japan, China. So again, you're not limited again from your geo perspective constraints. Last, but a little bit more on that comparison, how does differ Amazon Workspaces with traditional on-premise VDIs or even PCs, right? Time to provision, of course, you do 2 clicks, takes about a minute to provision Workspaces once it's everything configured. Well, if you need a desktop and you don't have it, you have to buy it. If you're a public institution, you have to procure it. Again, it takes about, well, weeks, right? At a best guess, right? The cost, pay as you go. Again, if you're not into infrastructure or hardware business, you always want to, no matter what a provider, no matter what vendor is on stage, you always want to go pay as you go, because that gives you elasticity, right? So every time someone goes up to stage and say, I want to scale, people just think growing up. But again, shrinking is it's a best practice as well. If you're not using, you're wasting. And if you're wasting, well, that's money that you're not reinvesting on your own business, right? So take the decision based on the capacity that you can grow and shrink according to your usage. Data storage is on AWS only. Again, if you put data on your region and that's not just Workspaces, we do not move your data. So again, if you start working in AWS Canada, Montreal, the data will be there. So no moving data back and forth over spilling to US, so you're compliant to data residency laws. Or PIPEDA, for example, if you need that type of compliance, again, you can use Workspaces for that. Additional Workspaces and its scalability part. So if you need to add more, just if you have the image, right? So it's just like a matter of clicking next, next, and finish, or issuing some commands to the API. If you're on-prem, well, you need to have the capacity, right? So it's not something infinite. With AWS, it's just like bump it up a new one, tens, dozens. It really matters your use case. The maintenance and application management part and aspect of it, you have one central point. You might have that on-prem as well. It all boils down on how do you want to manage that life cycle. Licensing apart, so instead of having 5 different bills from 5 different providers, you can have all in on your AWS account as well. And AWS will manage the infrastructure for you. So again, that desktop will be there no matter what. And if it fails, AWS will make it up for you. So you don't need to manage that as yourself, right? I guess this is very appealing from central IT perspective. Other than that, the try now is you need to try at least once. We have free tier available. So again, it does not cost you a penny. You can go online right now, create a AWS account. The AWS account goes into free tier. The first 12 months of your creation, you don't pay to use a couple of services that are available under aws.amazon.com/free. And with that, you can try it out WorkSpaces as for now. You can try it out on Windows, you can try it out on Linux, see if that fits to your use cases, and then start working. You don't even need to call Diego, you don't need to call Christian, you don't need to call anyone. It's just like go online with your credit cards and start using it right now. You can see a couple of hours there. It can run 2 standard bundles. It could be either Windows or Linux. And it will give you 50 gigs of storage, right? Same thing with our WorkDocs. It's a 30-day trial with a 1 terabyte of data. So again, if you want to try the file share capabilities, you're more than welcome to invite it. Go online and try both at once, right? I'll open up. I guess we have 15 minutes mark for questions, and I'll just leave it here so you can rate my session. Thank you. Questions? No? Over there? Oh. Okay. Yeah. Just make her back and forth, back and forth. A little bit easier.
Yeah.
Sure.
What I've noticed is, especially before Montreal was available, video coming from Northern Virginia, you said?
Yeah.
Carolina? Whatever. Was very choppy. Is Amazon doing anything to improve that in terms of acceleration? I don't mean graphics acceleration at the other end. That's not the problem. It's really the network where the things is coming from.
Yeah, so jittering, so the term for video chopping is jittering, right? So dropping packets every now and then and having to retransmit that. When you're doing locally, let's say, for example, Montreal, which is close by, you have a low latency of a network. So because you're really close, that tends to disappear. For example, if I plug it in, if that was a Mac and that I could plug in my iPad, I could stream a video without lag or sharpness from the workspaces within the iPad through the Mac, and you wouldn't notice anything. I could present even the whole session. From Virginia itself, it adds 100 millisecond lag. So that increased the overall experience.
So you're sitting in Regina, and you want this service.
So you want to be closer. So again, if you're here right now, you want to be in Ottawa. You want to be in Montreal region.
Yeah, but if you're in Regina?
So if you're Virginia, then you should run Virginia. And
No,
again,
I mean, Regina?
oh, Regina. So yeah,
In the middle of the country, if you're far from the service.
So you're far from
How do you-
service. Video streaming over a remote desktop is really a case-by-case studio. So you might as well go AppStream, which is a secondary offer that's just a single application. My workspaces might not be suited to your use case, but again, happy to go over your use cases. Let's say Regina to Montreal or Regina to, let's say, California over the Ask Expert, because it's really a case-by-case. So I guess the gentleman was on the other side. Okay? Yeah, okay.
Okay, we'll come back. We'll come back to you.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, well, he would have mentioned Direct Connect. So again, Direct Connect, if you're aware, it will link between your data center or your point of presence to a AWS point of presence. It will reduce the latency, but again, if you're running let's say, I'm playing a video on a remote desktop, it's really not the best use case to have a remote desktop. There's inherently limitations of it, right?
That was actually going to be part of my question is what is Direct Connect? But more importantly, if you run your own data center where you're running a large application, a banking platform, for example, and want to use this capability, what does the use case like similarly look like for somebody that's in, I won't say Regina, Calgary, trying to access something that's sitting in Winnipeg, but going through Montreal. And what kind of latency is it adding? No graphics or like no video graphics.
So again, getting back to the use cases, if you're using the application server type of applications, you might notice no lag at all. It really using even Canada, cross borders, or US region, or even down below using São Paulo region, which is within Brazil, you wouldn't really notice anything because it's already inherently to the use case to click and wait, right? So if I'm doing a video conference, and there's one thing. If I'm doing a banking scenario where I have a workstation, there's talking with the servers, there's sitting miles from that, that's a completely different scenario. You could use it. You could use privately. So again, a part of your solution would be Direct Connect. So Direct Connect will be a link of your on-premise infrastructure within AWS region. You choose whether it's going to be Montreal, let's say, for example. And once you choose that, you can segregate the networking capabilities as well. Let's say, for example, that WorkSpaces will not have internet access, and it will have limited access to those endpoints within your private network. So it should work as flawlessly.
And sorry, just one more. How well do peripherals work with WorkSpaces? So
Well,
printers, receipt printers, all those kinds of things.
Yeah. So USB, sound, video, and printers works as any other remote desktops. I would say long time ago, in the first iteration of WorkSpaces, was a poor experience with certain types of printers. Like banking printers, for example. But right now, if you have a driver for Windows or a driver for Linux, it will work. Okay? Yeah, we're just making you run back and
Yeah,
forth.
exactly.
So I'm just buying
Get my
time.
steps in.
Yeah, right?
Sorry, just over here? Oh, there we go.
Thanks. First, I'll just say we have that scenario where with our company, users are connecting from Calgary, Regina, all over the country to data centers close to Ottawa, and they experience latency and issues that you guys described. So not with Amazon desktops, but just pure Citrix and other capabilities. So speed of light issue there, and the RDP protocol has limitations. I'm interested in what DLP or data loss prevention capabilities. I know our security guys were worried about screen scraping on personal computers. You might have a virus or something like that. So we're looking at technology such as like Windows to Go and things like that could, you boot up a fresh, clean instance on a private computer, and then it kind of gives you some sort of security footprint. So what capabilities from encryption to data loss prevention do you guys offer on this?
Yeah, so twofold answer. So from the encryption part, everything from data in transit at rest, they will be encrypted. You choose your keys, so you can either bring it up your own keys, you can use the service keys available, or you can create new keys over AWS. So encryption is there for a reason, right? From the other side, data loss protection, right? So let's say I have a desktop that is a Amazon machine image, right? So that's an image. You can reboot anyway, so you can even triggers a reboot after each usage. But let's say for a perspective, it's a persistence desktop for your users, right? So it's a Windows. You can run your own antivirus. You can use partners within the marketplace to offer you antivirus with the same pay-as-you-go feature for that desktop that's running into the cloud. And from a managing perspective is to manage everything from a single point as a Active Directory or SCCM. So again, as do you have a follow-up on that?
But just say an example of I require a certain set of security before you can even log into that desktop. I don't know if it's 802.11x or something where your home PC virus has to be up to date. You have X, Y, and Z,
So,
something along those lines before you get access to that secure environment.
So there's a couple of things. If you control that endpoint, you can have that. If you do not control that endpoint, you might enforce that as a certificate. Let's say, for example, you can only allow people that have that private certificate with a private certificate authority to connect to your endpoints. From our perspective, there's no data sharing. So again, if your computer is compromised with a virus, malware, bloatware, it doesn't matter. There's no overspilling activity that goes and connects those two devices together, right? So the first of all, there's isolation, all completely, okay? And further than that, you can make sure that you run under the shared responsibility principle, you do your guidelines, and there's no access to the internet, it's private, there's access to just 1-2 resources within your network, okay? Any more? Okay, thank you. Thank you, have a great day, bye.